Hey, this is Brett Bonecutter. I am working on a book right now called The Pajama Philosopher, and this is the provisional book title. I may have to change it, but tonight I have to do a quick video because I'm just dying. I know if you've been watching this online, there's a debate between Bill Nye, the science guy, and Ken Ham from the Creation Museum. And honestly, I'm just about to jump out of my skin right now. And so I just got to put my 2 cents on the table for whatever it's worth. My book's going to address this at much more length. I'm just skipping over the top. But I need to deal with this. Number one, the question of taking the Bible literally. Okay, if you take the Bible literally, if you respect the Bible and you think that it's an important book, if it's your book that you've based your faith on, which I do, for example, does it require that the earth is young, or that God actually created in 6 literal 24-hour days? Does the Bible require that? Is that the way that we need to do it? Well, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do before you watch any more of this, if you're not intimately familiar, find a Bible, go online, read Genesis 1 through 2:4. Just take the time and read it. Go slowly. You can pause this and come back, but do that. Okay, after you do that, let's look real quick. What does it mean to be literal? It means very simply to interpret something as literature. There's 66 books in the Bible. There's all kinds of different literature in the Bible. There's history, there's didactic, there's apocalyptic, there's poetry, there's metaphors in there, there's allegory, there's typology. I mean, it's all over the place. So you have to come to each text as it's meant to be read, and you have to interpret it accordingly. It's not being literal doesn't mean that you're woodenly literal all the time. Okay, but what about Genesis 1 and 2? What are we supposed to do with that? One of the big questions is, aren't there 2 creation narratives? It seems like there's one in Genesis 1 through about 2:3, and then 2:4 seems to pick up on something else. Well, here's the quick answer, I think, to this, and I'm going to try to show you this here. Genesis 1 is what we call exalted prose narrative. It reads like a story, okay? But in fact, it's got a real intricate structure to it that is very different than just sort of a normal narrative or a normal story. We're going to look at that in a second. That's what gives it almost a poetic structure and a song-like quality to it. It really functions like an overture to a musical. It's hitting some of the massive theological themes that are going to get worked out in the rest of the Bible. So if you've ever been to a musical before, the curtain is closed, the orchestra is playing all the great themes of the musical that you're going to hear, and that's basically what's going on in Genesis 1. It's like the thesis statement or the prologue to the whole Bible. Then in Genesis 2:4 and following, you see the curtain raises and the story begins. Now, I'm not going to talk about this primeval history in Genesis 2 through 11. That's a whole different story, but I just want to focus for a minute on this Genesis 1 piece. Now, again, at the risk of being naive here, I'm not going to address whether or not Genesis 1 is true history. What I want to draw out, though, is what I think is most important from Genesis 1 and why I think that we should look at it this way. Instead of reading Genesis 1 as God's daily diary entries for 6 days, I think you have to look at it as that it is the story of God, heaven, and earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So this is the story of God, heaven, and earth, and it puts man in the middle. Genesis 1 puts man as the image of God in the middle of this story, in the middle of the universe and of the creation, for a reason that gets frankly unpacked later throughout the story. It also shows that God not only exists, but he's engaged and he's sovereign. So he's not disengaged, he's not a force, he's not a personless, amorphous, or even polytheistic sort of panoply of gods, but he's one God who is engaged and sovereign, and he made the world good. So this physical world is good and very good. It's not a corrupt emanation or something that we're supposed to flee from. It's not an illusion. It's good. And that this world is destined for glories. It's headed somewhere. So he didn't create something, and frankly, I'm going to say this, he didn't make it perfect. He didn't make it complete. Let's look at this real quick. This is fascinating. If you read Genesis 1 carefully, you can see that in the first 3 days, we have a triplet. And that triplet is that his action is he's dividing. On day 1, it's light from dark. Day 2, heaven and earth. Day 3, earth from the sea. The second triplet is that he is filling. So on day 4, he fills the sky with sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, he fills with bird and fish. And day 6 fills with animals and man. So you have these 2 triplets, and then you have 3 couplets. I don't know if you can see this, but basically you see how day 1 and day 4 go together. So day 4, he's filling that which he had divided in day 1. On day 5, he's filling that which he had divided on day 2, and 6 and 3, and so forth. So you have these 2 couplets, or 3 couplets, and 3 couplets and 2 triplets that structure the whole thing. Now you might say this is kind of convoluted or whatever, but this is where it's interesting. After every day, God said, and he saw that it was good, and he saw that it was good, and he saw that it was good, except for one. On one day, he did not say that. On day 2, he is silent. Go check your Bible. I mean, it's there. He doesn't say it. On day 2, when he separates heaven from earth, he's silent. So it's like a refrain in a song where he saw that it was good, he saw that it was good, he saw that it was good. If you miss one of those refrains, if that refrain is silent and you're a student of literature or a student of music, silence is powerful. That blank is powerful. Let's look at it another way if the matrix is confusing for you. You see that there's a series of benedictions God gives after every day, but he doesn't do it on day 2. And what day was that? It was the day that he divided heaven from earth. Look, back to the question. Does Genesis 1, does a literal translation or interpretation of Genesis 1 demand that God created in 6 24-hour days? No way. No way. There is so much more philosophically, theologically going on in this chapter that separates it from other religions, other philosophies. It's unbelievable. And the real thrust of this is about heaven and earth being separated, which wasn't the ultimate plan. It wasn't good. Putting man in the middle because God was going to use man to glorify earth. That's what Genesis 1 is about. So all this stuff and trying to prove that, the earth is young, it's 24-hour days, blah, 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 and then trying to say that this is what the Bible demands, that is not helpful to Christians. It's not helpful to the Christian cause. It's not a good witness. I'm not going to comment on whether it's good science or not, but it is absolutely not demanded by the text. And I think with all due respect to my brother Ken Ham, when he ventures into this territory and frankly doesn't know how to handle his Bible right, I think we got a real problem. So if you are somebody who is interested in this or been watching it, I just want to assure you that Genesis 1 does not have to be interpreted that way, because the real point is about God bringing heaven and earth together and man in the middle. Hope that's helpful. And I'm coming off my soapbox now. Bye.